Inflation news came out last week and it wasn't pretty for Australians. Inflation began rising again with a 1% print for the Q1 2024. In this podcast, we're going to deep dive into the inflation story and discuss what it means for interest rates. Will they increase interest rates from this print alone? It's unlikely, but we talk about what they may do. This is a complete change in direction from just a few weeks ago when inflation was clearly falling, with inflation now back to a problem topic for Australia.
Inflation is running hot and it seems like everyone has lost their minds. We got a much higher than expected data release for the March quarter of inflation. That's what we're going to unpack today on Australian Property Talk. And yeah, it has created a lot of drama, which is concerning and entertaining at the same time. Rita, what are your thoughts today?
Bad.
Bad?
As soon as it happened, within 6 minutes, I'd had my TikTok and Instagram video out. Got a lot of views on it straight away. I was like, this is bad. It was bad. It's bad on every metric that you look at. I was so encouraged, so encouraged with the print before it, where it came in at 0.6%.
Yep.
For
in
the December.
Yep.
So for the last quarter of 2023, the downward trend of inflation was strong. It was like, yay, we're going down a slippery slope. Yay, interest rate cuts are coming. Woohoo. But this has come out for Q1 where it's like, no. That's what when I saw it, I was pulling my hair. I'm like, no. This is bad news. It's bad news for Australia. Economy's slowing. Inflation's going up. You have to say that. Inflation is increasing again.
So it was a 0.8 print, so 0.6 last time. So
it was a 1% print.
Oh, sorry, 1% print, a 0.8 market prediction for it. Yes, so 1% print. So from 0.6, big change.
Much higher than the markets predicted as well. I know it's 0.2%, but like the markets are predicting 0.8. I was hoping that a 0.6% print will come. And if a 0.6% print did come, then rate cuts, you can actually talk about them happening if you just got one or two bad employment prints. They'll be like, let's cut rates. Instead, the entire conversation has completely changed. We're talking about whether we're going to increase interest rates now. And I sit here, and if I'm the RBA governor, this sounds horrible, but if I'm the RBA governor and I haven't pre-committed to anything, I might be increasing interest rates right now. I'm thinking, my hand is on the button being like, should I do this? Should I not? The data is kind of telling me to do it. I said I was going to be data dependent. Like, it's that bad. The print is horrible. So that's what I think.
Yeah, that is...
Sorry.
It is dramatic. It is a little disconcerting as well. I'm probably not quite as bullish or as bearish, I should say, as you. I think, like the headline inflation's 3.6, like it was 4.1 in the December quarter. So technically, like the 12-month inflation, we are still coming down.
The RBA give no shits about that though. That's my thing.
Like we're dropping off higher inflation quarters from 2022. Exactly. So like the data can move around. I don't think the RBA are going to be, I would be very surprised if they raise rates. I think it's pushing off any consideration of rate cuts is how I would describe it.
This is why I was so concerned. Because you get this next quarter again. If you get a 1% print again, your hand is on top of that. You have to go. You have to. You have to be like.
I agree with that. Yeah. If you get two 1% prints in a row, then you probably have to raise
we got
rates.
one of them. So it's like, no, you can't increase interest rates because the economy's slowing down. We're struggling. It's so obvious in every data metric. Wherever you speak to, at the cafe, at the barber, everyone I talk to is saying that. It's so freaking obvious right now. The RBA know that the economy's slowing down. They feel it. That narrow path that we're in, if you start raising interest rates again, that's gone. Like now we're at a point where we don't have resilience baked in. We don't have any other options. We have to let things go and we need inflation to come down. We've adjusted settings. The economy's slowing down. Everything is happening as it's supposed to. If inflation starts going up from here, that's bad. And that's what's happened in Q1 2024. Inflation has gone up. Regardless of whatever's on the ABS website up the top in that right-hand corner, inflation is going up. That is just a fact for Q1 2024.
Yeah, okay. So there are some not necessarily balancing factors to that piece of data, but there are some different metrics that we can look at to try gauge how the economy is going more broadly. So retail sales is one that's come in really, really soft recently. Like that's down to 3-ish year lows.
Shocker.
Basically every category of retail sales other than I think food is down as well. So it's not...
People are still eating? What are they thinking?
Yeah. So people are eating, but beyond that, they're not doing anything else. So that...
Did you see clothing? Did you see clothing there?
That's down like 4.5 or something.
Yeah, it was like nosedive. People are like, I don't need clothes.
Or shoes, I think.
I'll stay on my old
Footwear.
clothes. Yeah,
Clothing. Yeah. So that's a pretty strong sign that consumption is very, very soft. Like household consumption is very soft. That obviously isn't picked up in the data, like the inflation numbers that have come out, because it's a little more real time than the actual inflation data. So that's showing that, yeah, consumption is very, very soft. The other factor that I would always look at is like unemployment. That did tick up a little bit, but that side of things to, I think it was 3.7 to 3.8. But that's still showing that at least the job market appears to be quite strong given the softness in the rest of the economy. Which is an interesting one. It might be, again, that the unemployment figure is a little bit stickier than some other figures. Businesses and employers and employees potentially take a little bit longer to adjust to changing circumstances and don't like hiring and firing on a whim. So there might be some stickiness there, but that's indicating that the employment market isn't crashing, if that makes sense.
It's true. Yeah, I think that's a fair summary. And that's where I get a little bit concerned. And that's why, specifically, the employment market is why, if I'm the RBA governor, my hand is on that red button right now because I have no patience. I have no tolerance. It's 2024. Prices are up 20% in 3 years. People's standard of living have been devastated in this country from this inflation problem. And it's been going for years and years and years. And they've demonstrated we are not going to be patient with it anymore. They demonstrated that in the last quarter of 2023 when they increased interest rates, I think in November, being like, hey, look, we're losing patience with inflation taking too long to get back into band. Now inflation it was falling below their trajectory. Now it's above their trajectory again. So with that in mind and employment being better than their trajectory, you know, we're fully employed and beyond fully employed, according to their own sort of data metrics on this. They've kind of said 4.5% is their number that they're comfortable with as full employment.
Rate, yep.
Yeah, I'm sure Bullock has specifically talked about that and specifically mentioned that number. So we're well and truly in front of that. And for inflation to come down, maybe we need to be above that, sad as that is. The data metrics are there. We also have a near 1 percentage point differential between us and America. Like, there's a lot of things there being like, oh, it's a bit ugly. Like, I didn't want to do this. I really wanted to protect homeowners and, mortgage holders and Australians from more pain. I wanted to do that, but I'm a central banker. My job is to get inflation down. My job is to keep full employment. I have metrics to measure this. My job here kind of tells me to do one thing. And I think you're right. They will be patient. They should be patient. I'm not so sure. I retract that statement. Should they be patient? I'm not sure. I think they will be patient.
Yeah.
I hope they're patient. But if you're remaining data dependent, you want to stick true to your word. I actually think the markets aren't pricing in the realistic probability of increasing interest rates nearly as much as they should. Because if I'm the central banker and I'm looking at it just from pure economics, forget the media, forget the noise, forget what I've said, forget all about that. I'm just looking at the data. The data tells me to increase interest rates. It's clear. It's obvious. It's like, well, I got one decision to make.
To contextualize it, I'd probably split it into just like 3 big groups, right? You've got inflation, you've got employment, and then you've got, say, just economic performance.
Yep.
Like if you were assessing it as of today, like what do I do? Inflation, you're probably thinking like, I need to raise rates. Inflation's too high. This print is what would tip you to that. Employment, again, you could probably say there's a case there to raise rates. You're under the natural rate of like the NAIRU, as they would call it, or however you want to term it. Like unemployment at below 4% is too hot, essentially, for the economic conditions. And then it would only be the actual economic performance, which GDP lags a little bit, but that's where the retail sales and trying to gauge how is the economy actually performing. That's the one that's soft and wouldn't justify a rate rise.
Yeah.
So depending on how you weigh those kind of 3 factors, which is Michelle Bullock's job, is where you kind of sit. But I kind of agree with you that there are at least a couple of those factors that put a rate rise on the table. I don't think it's going to happen, to be honest. But
yeah, neither do I. I don't think they'll do it.
It's there.
I hope they don't do it, but I wouldn't be as shocked as markets if that explains it a little bit.
I'd still be pretty shocked.
Markets are not saying, but I think the reason why everyone's shocked is because no one's saying that they're going to do it. The RBA haven't said anything. They've been quiet, right? But come next Tuesday, the RBA is going to be coming out with their statement, and in my opinion, they need to, at the very least, say we're going to increase interest rates. They don't have to increase interest rates. They need to say it though. They need to be like, this print, the nature of this print, the makeup of domestic-based inflation rising again, and our tolerance level for inflation being higher than banned through all of 2024 is just not there anymore. And sorry, Australia, but we've saved you from pain. New Zealand across the ditch knew this. They put themselves into recession. They've had to do what they had to do. It's just the medicine we have to pay because inflation is eroding our living standards. It's eroding everyone's living standards. It's hurting the most vulnerable Australians the most. We need to do something about this. It's time to stick to our mandate, which our mandate isn't economic activity. It's not even in there. Their mandate is price stability, inflation, and full employment.
Yeah.
On those two metrics, the data just is clear. It's just like, oh, okay. If you just look at the individual merits of this decision, it actually points to maybe I should increase interest rates. Maybe you don't want to do it in one go. Maybe you want to talk about it and then do it.
Yeah.
But the patience element is there.
I think from the, if I was working at the RBA, I think the concerning, obviously, the print being high is concerning, but I think the longer term, the thing that would be concerning them is you don't want to get into a cycle of like stagflation, as it's termed, where you've got high inflation and low economic growth.
That's us right now. That's us. We're in stagflation.
But you don't want to get stuck in a cycle of that. Like that becomes increasingly damaging. You kind of need those measures working together where if you've got your brake pedal and your accelerator for the economy using interest rates and it works essentially. If you've got zero growth and you've got 6% inflation for 2 or 3 years, you're a little screwed. So I think one print of this is tolerable, I think, for them. That's where I think it will land. But if you get multiple prints of this, you have to raise rates to basically bring inflation down and ensure that you don't have stagflation.
Yep.
Because if you drag that out over years, you end up in a net worse position than if you absorb a lot of short-term pain and get it over and done with, basically.
Kind of, yeah.
I think that's the decision-making framework for thinking about it over a longer-term window. So while the actual print itself will be concerning for them, I think that might be the thought process is having an extended period of stagflation is not acceptable. That's the worst end outcome for everyone. So if
doesn't that align to increasing interest rates? We're in stagflation, growth is horrible and inflation's high. We've been in that setting for all of 2023.
Yeah, yes, I think you'd need a second print though.
Yeah.
Inflation has been coming down sufficiently quickly that I don't think we've been in stagflation, if that makes sense. Inflation's been falling, economic activity's been falling. They've been moving in the same direction. If you've got a situation where inflation stops falling and zeroes out or increases and economic activity is still going downhill quickly, that's where you've got you're getting a disparity between those two things. They're not moving in the same direction at the same time. Up until this print, I think they had been moving in the same direction at the same time.
Yeah. That's true.
So that's why I think the concern might be more from that perspective, which would, like you say, require another data release to either confirm or to validate or invalidate that kind of hypothesis.
I think it's all about, I think the RBA will weight this data release a lot, the highest, but I think they'll take the last data set and combine them a lot too. I think they'll ignore 6-12 months ago. They'll be like, stuff that. I don't need to look at that. That's too old. Let's annualize the 6-month sort of rate. Annualizing the 3-month rate, maybe there's noise in that data, if that makes sense. So, they won't look at it in isolation. When you do that, it's a much better story because that December print was okay. And, you annualize 0.6 and 1.
Soft, The December print was soft. So,
It was very soft. So, let's combine them in together. Inflation is on trend of where we think it is. One came in low, one came in high. We expected data volatility here. We expected a bit of a roughy ride. As of today, it's a bit rough. That's okay. But let's stay patient. Let's stay to form. The next one will be okay. The reason why this is so concerning and the reason why it's so bad is as of 60 days ago, or even, 15 days ago before this inflation print, I would have said that interest rate increases are over. It's not going to happen. But this print has come out where it's just another print just like this, be I think we're making a podcast after the next inflation print being you got to increase interest rates again. That is the setting of how perilous it is, even though the markets are saying, hey, no, we're not going to increase interest rates. But yeah, we've taken away all the cuts all the way out to July 2025. That's kind of what the markets are suggesting at the moment. There's not going to be any cuts, or one cut comes in before then. The markets are sort of suggesting, hey, look, inflation will come down because economic activity is low. All these retail sales are low. Obviously, they're going to start dropping prices. All these clothing stores that can't sell their clothes, basically, that's kind of what it's there.
Yep.
And it's across all sectors. They're not selling enough stuff. So, drop my prices to go and get people to spend. Like, that is kind of what should be happening with this economic activity slowing. Unemployment should trend upwards. The plan should remain in place. Let's not deviate course. Let's not add in more pain to the economy during a period where, it's clearly already slowing based on one economic data piece, when a lot of all the other data pieces suggest, hey, the economy is really slow.
That's
the saving message.
That's the kind of story that I believe and kind of resonate with, if that makes sense. That we've got one data point that's showing inflation higher than expected / increasing, depending on how you want to describe it. But all the other data points are
Bad.
pretty weak. Employment's not bad, but like there's a lot of signs that unemployment's going up, albeit slowly. Inflation previously was tracking down, and like economic activity was also tracking down. All like moving in the directions that they should in concert.
Yep.
We've got one data point now that inflation has ticked up, while the other two are still going in the original direction.
Do you have any more specifics on that data point by any chance, Curtis? Like, especially the service-based inflation that the RBA have been talking about across the past 12 months, and the big concern that it's a domestic-based issue where demand is outstripping supply in the economy, and hence domestic-based services, the hairdressers and dentists, they're the ones that are increasing prices.
I don't know if I have the data points in front of me, but they have said that, it's domestic services-based inflation that's driving the results now. So, previously it might have been over a year ago or whenever it was, we were talking about out of COVID, so much supply-side inflation being effectively imported, or supply-side stickiness in the economy resulting in price increases. That's pretty much been stripped out of the statement and the data now, and the inflation is coming from demand side services based inflation, which is slightly, or I guess it is concerning, because that is the harder one to strip out, if that makes sense.
We're really, probably shouldn't mention this. I just feel like we're really stuffing it up a little bit. Like, there's people with powers to influence this. They've absolved themselves from responsibility. The government's just like, it's the RBA's problem. They love inflation because it's the RBA's problem. Let's deal with it. At the same time, at every single opportunity, they're talking about pushing up wage growth as much as they can, which I understand is a nice motivation. People need that. Definitely, I appreciate that. But you are filtering through the main problem of inflation. The main domestic-based problem of inflation is creating a wage expectation theory that, hey, look, we need to continue to chase inflation in our wage growth amounts. The government's pushing that. It's a big part of their agenda. That, that has happened year on year on year, and it's pushing up prices of a number of different goods and services.
Tax relief?
There's tax relief kicking in. There's $20 billion of stimulus kicking in this year. Push that back a year. Like, sorry, Australia, push it back a year. Take some pain, take some medicine. Like, make some tough calls. Like, it's what the economy needs right now. Meanwhile, they have all these sort of strange growth agendas that are all increasing the cost of freaking doing in Australia at exactly the same time. Like a strange policy agenda that's not fit for times at the moment, where it's just like, this report card is bad, being like, maybe we should take control of inflation a little bit more and come up with inflation reduction sort of schemes. Not just call it that. Just call it that. I think that's what the Americans have done. But not just increase spending, basically, and reduce taxes, which is what all governments like to do. But the prescription of how we're going about this is somewhat dangerous, particularly in June next year. I think the RBA consider that. It adds 0.75% to GDP. It adds as much GDP we've added in over the last 3 quarters or over the last 6 months, been thrown in June. We're putting in fuel to the fire at the moment, and the government is doing that. They're the ones who have responsibility over taxes, and the government's adding in fuel to the fire and saying, we need cost of living relief. Let's give it out to everyone, including high income earners. Like, it's not fitting for times. Perhaps as, things that can be done to help the RBA, not hurt the RBA. Because they're sitting there being like, what do I do? Like, give me one more print, like just one more data release that comes in slightly high, 0.9%, probably does it. Like, that's not even that crazy. You're like, you're getting 0.9%. I've been to the Bowser as well. I'm like, oh, how much is fuel going to add to this quarter CPI? It's going to add 0.1, 0.2, 0.3%. I just fueled up for nearly $2.50. Like, that's all happened in the last 90 days. Like, that's going to feed through into this CPI release. So there's like, how do I call it? Like, what do I frame it as? We're like balancing over a little bit of a cliff at the moment and being like, oh, yikes. And, one strong wind is going to tip inflation the wrong way. And if it does, the RBA don't have many outs at the moment, unless a bad unemployment print comes in, something comes in that says, okay, like, let's hold this off. They won't do it on retail sales, but if employment remains really strong and inflation comes in high again, like at some point, they're just going to have to respond.
Yeah, and I think the employment one is that is the only number that could give them pause for thought. I even think weak GDP data, like recessionary data, isn't going to give them that much pause for thought either. It is what it is to some extent. But yeah, I think it would only be a big tick up in unemployment that would stop them. But yeah, I think, yes, the government, like the government sector fiscal policy, to be honest, has way more power than monetary policy to change things around. But I think the idea of some policy setting being put forward is
the tax cuts. That it seems like a problem again.
I just think the chances of action on that front is you just assume that's zero. Like the political structure we have with the RBA being separate and independent from the government just means that whoever's in power, they're incentivized to do what people want them to do, and they can push the
blame onto them.
The blame, and the person that has to give out the medicine is someone separate. So like, from their perspective, even though it's not the best outcome and it's not necessarily the best thing for Australia, it's a bit of a win-win where we can go, all right, well, we do what people want, and then whatever pain that causes, someone else dishes out the punishment for that.
Definitely.
So
look, I should clarify, I'm not saying that interest rates are going to increase. I don't think interest rates are going to increase actually, but I am saying that the RBA are going to sit there, put a lot of weight on this data set, and if unemployment still starts with a 3 in 3 or 4 months, or even is in the early 4% range, and one more quarterly print comes out in 90 days, in 3 months' time, that starts with a percentage point and above, I'm saying that, like the RBA is going to increase interest rates there.
Yeah.
It's now perilously close to increasing interest rates. One data print, maybe 2 if you include employment, from increasing interest rates. And that is a complete change from, the last time we did a podcast.
Yeah, when it was super soft. Yeah.
It was super soft. It's a complete change.
Yeah.
The directional change is a bit of an issue. The composition of inflation is a bit of an issue. The nature of our economy is not nice to talk about. It's the worst.
It's going backwards.
We've talked about the economy for 10 years. How long have we known each other? Since Treasury
Long
days?
enough, yeah.
Yeah. For 12 years, we've talked about the economy week on week. This is the worst picture, other than COVID, that we have talked about. 2018 was horrible as well. During that period, I was like, what are they thinking here? Where you just stop credit, being like, who thought that was a good idea? That was bonkers. But like this is ugly. Interest rates really high. Cost of living really a big issue. Rents really, really high. House prices at their peak levels. Borrowing capacity is down. For living, for actually just surviving in this country and in this city, it's really, really bad. Living standards are feeling the pinch a little bit. Employment is keeping everything together, but if that starts becoming a bit noisy, overall, it's not that great, especially with inflation high after all this period and the economy slowing so much. So a little bit of an choppy waters is how I describe it at the moment. And this print, concerning. And the reason why I'm a little bit bearish on this is people have like come to me and said, hey, look, is it really that bad? To be like, yeah, this inflation print is bad. Like, RBA is not going to just be like, nah, ignore it. They're going to delve into the deep data in here, and they're going to have their team of experts look at that, and they're all going to say the same thing, being like, it's bad.
Yeah. You can just pass the phone to me there. And I'm like, I don't know if it's that bad. It'll be all right.
Yeah.
But I think, for economics nerds, this will be an interesting one, I think, to learn a little bit about Michelle Bullock too, because I would say this is the first decision since she's been governor where
I thought that too.
There would be an opportunity, like if she wants to be an RBA governor that's a little bit more preemptive and, shock the market, so to speak, That's probably a bit overdoing it. Just a bit more preemptive, right?
I do think
like
so, yeah.
some governors like to be a bit more preemptive, be in front of the markets and send a signal.
Yeah.
And if she wants to do that, this is the first decision where that's actually on the table, if that makes sense.
I thought this too. I looked at this and I thought this too. Like when it first came out, I'm like, the markets are pricing in Governor Lowe as
Kind
in
of,
charge.
yeah,
They got 7 years of history of this guy.
Yeah,
They know
yeah,
what he's
exactly.
gonna do.
Yeah.
He said something. He's going to be reluctant to do it, right? Do we have any feel for?
No, that's
this
why.
person?
I think this will be interesting because this is the first, I would say, the most live decision, or the November one as well. But I think there's an opportunity if she does want to be more preemptive than like Governor Lowe was, because he wasn't at all, right? Like
this is what I think. I think when you factor this in a little bit, being like we have very little data on her in charge. We're assuming that she's Governor Lowe's like deputy, so she's been there for a long time. Same school of thought. We're assuming all of that, but the data sets that we do have, the little bits in November, it wasn't a dead certainty that we increase interest rates, but she communicated that we're going to do it and then did it. So she hasn't said a thing. Like it's been a vacuum of silence since that inflation print. So we're kind of the markets, I think, are a little bit. Underplaying the risk of her changing tone here a little bit, because if she remains true to her word, which is data dependent, that bit is like, oh, okay, I can easily make a case for maybe I need to increase interest rates. At the very least, I need to say I'm going to do it if I get another print or signal for it. That makes sense. So I think the markets might be under predicting that. But at the same time, last night, before we've done this pod, last night, Powell in America just had his communication and markets all celebrated no more increase. He didn't say we're going to increase interest rates. He said, cuts coming later, but he said we're not going to increase interest rates. So, they're celebrating that as of today.
But I think that's an interesting side note.
Not that relevant, I don't think.
No, I mean, Michelle Bullock, like just how she's going to govern, basically. Exactly, It's an interesting side note for the next decision because it is the first opportunity for her, if she does want to be preemptive and change the approach from how Governor Lowe operated, basically. She's got a chance to do it. I think it's pretty unlikely, but I don't know her, so who knows?
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, Kurt, let's wrap this up. You've got our thoughts on the latest inflation print here, a bad inflation print. Not good news for mortgage holders, but unlikely to cause any interest rate increases as of today. There is a meeting next week of the RBA governors where they will announce what they plan on doing with interest rates and provide a little bit more clarity and steer on the direction of rates in the near future. So tune in for our next podcast where we talk and deep dive into the RBA's announcement.